So I'm George Church, professor of genetics at Harvard Medical School, and investigator in the Wyss Institute for Biologically Inspired Engineering. We work on advanced technologies for reading and writing in DNA and neuronal systems, aging, and so forth. We have many new things that we hope to tell you in June 2013, and really looking forward to seeing you there. So I'm really looking forward to seeing you at Global Futures 2045 in New York Lincoln Center in June 2013. Right now we back up human brains by education. Basically, I try to teach my students, and it's a very slow process, and it's a very poor copy. It's nothing like what we consider a good copy of a computer. Cloning of people, even if it were done, which it isn't, would not copy any of that information. So really, the question is, how do we copy it? Do we copy it to purely inorganic systems? Do we copy it to hybrid systems? You know, the most likely backup would be, you know, a complete three-dimensional reconstruction of a brain, rather than trying to translate it into a silicon. That's not to say that it's impossible or even difficult to completely translate it into a foreign substrate. It's just that probably in terms of rapidity of change, we'll get coarse grain or sampling of the brain into electronic systems, and but to actually produce the kind of very high-level thought, the out-of-the-box thinking that produces new inventions and new works of art and brilliant insights, may not be our swiftest move. May not be to a purely silicon-based system. In terms of enhancement, what we consider enhancement changes from time to time. You know, long ago, a tractor would be an incredible enhancement to my physical abilities. You know, a car and a jet certainly is. But as we become, in a certain sense, less and less physical as a society, we're looking for things that help us keep track of our information, to allow us to reason on a larger set of things simultaneously. The human brain, most human brains have trouble thinking of more than keeping seven things in their head at a time, and they have trouble you know, remembering more than a few new bits of information per second for long periods of time. So ability to compute on larger sets of things, but with the human ability to think out of the box and to think inventively, I think is already happening. I mean, it's just that right now the bottleneck is no longer our storage and search systems, which are actually quite good. It's our ability to think creatively about multiple of the results from that search on multiple things at once, and it's a little hard to predict, but that seems to be on a very steep exponential curve right now in a very positive way. I'm very optimistic that we will get much better at life extension, partly because we're now studying the genomic differences of extreme individuals, such as people who live past 110 years old. We'll learn all the tricks that are present in their genomes soon, within years. Once we start, we're getting better at replacing body parts. We'll get better and better at making, using synthetic biology to make organs. But as you do that, I mean, in a certain sense, every organ in your body is replaceable at some level, except your brain. And so your aging brain will be our biggest problem. Providing support systems for the rest of your body does not solve the problem that your brain is getting Alzheimer's, or that the best way to prevent your brain from getting Alzheimer's is to figure out why some people never get Alzheimer's and to inject those genes into your brain. But then there are other aging processes. We're getting much better at gene therapy. We now have 80 gene therapies in clinical trials. Some of those work on post-mitotic cells like muscles and nerves. If we get to the point where we can reprogram the neuronal cell body, then we can retain all the connections of the neurons that have built up over a lifetime of experiences, just rejuvenating the central processor, the nucleus of the cell, And you can think of it in the same way that we're kind of updating the genetic and epigenetic information the same way we might update the blood flow, taking away wastes and bringing in food on a minute-to-minute basis. This would be something that you'd be doing to the kind of the information molecules of the cell nucleus. I think the main advantage of hooking up each neuron to some electronic system or some other molecular computing system that's not neuronal is so that we can understand it better and start interfacing with brain to brain and brain to internet. Not so much for extending longevity. There you have to figure out how to maintain the longevity of the brain, which I think is actually a harder problem than replacing parts. Kidneys, arms. The international mega projects like Brain Activity Map or extended brain-computer interface are still extremely important, even if it doesn't necessarily give us the simplest route to aging. It is arguable that a huge fraction of our economics and both on the positive and negative side of economics is due to problems with psychiatric disorders, neurodegenerative diseases, education, all sorts of things having to do with the brain. So it will be a revolution in human society when we have better health care that focused on brain behavior, psychiatric disorders, as well as new opportunities for education and thought, augmenting the particular ways that we think. The whole idea of neo-Darwinian evolution being limited to DNA evolution is already outdated. We are a hybrid system. We're much more of a hybrid system than any other plant or animal on the planet. That is to say that we judge our ability to change our abilities themselves for hybrids. In other words, my daughter inherits my computer literacy, and she inherits the standard of living in a general sense, which is not limited to DNA. And our non-DNA component of our human evolution is already going faster than our DNA component. The internet inheritance is going faster, and a biologist would say it's propagating horizontally, vertically being through the child relationship, which is happening. Child is inheriting my inorganic components, but it's horizontally. If I have a good idea, it can spread throughout the internet very quickly. So I think that's just all that's accelerating. We're getting, there's no particular limit to how quickly we can evolve, because we're no longer limited to DNA and vertical transmission. To some extent, I'm already using avatars. This video is an avatar. I think the main advantage that I see in the short term is less travel. If we get a realistic enough representation of me, if I can go and inspect a site, and people at the site can inspect me, then that eliminates the energy costs and the health consequences of travel. That's a big plus. That seems rather prosaic and limited compared to having a clone of me, which would also be nice, a backup of me. But I think it's a major economic milestone that we will reach. And every time that there is a pandemic or some other outbreak, terrorism or so forth, there will be an increase in interest in the ability to have the moral equivalent of travel without having to move. There will be other advantages where I might be able to participate in 2 events simultaneously, which again is very difficult to do if we require my physical body to move around. So I think these things really shouldn't even be particularly controversial. I mean, really, it would be great if I could be at a meeting in 12 different time zones and not get exhausted. It should be uncontroversial that the saving of energy and the saving of lives due to not spreading diseases the way we... Right now, if we had a truly aggressively respiratory illness that's spread through airplane travel, we would regret just how much air travel we do right now as a species. So I think all of those are positive and uncontroversial. If I could learn faster, that would be another huge advantage to me, or think more clearly. If we do hypothetically gain the ability to transfer our knowledge and being, in a certain sense, our personality, to another biological or hybrid entity, device, person, what will immediately happen is you'll have two copies of yourself. It won't be like having twins. It'll be much more intimate than that. And each of you will ideally feel like you're the original. I mean, if you've really done a good copying job, then you'll feel like... Now, the telepresence illusion will disappear as soon as, let's say, one of them is dying. Then you have to kind of convince yourself that the second one is an adequate representation. You don't want to have a bad clone of yourself floating around. And I think this will be a major... It will require a major set of demonstrations, the same way that Food and Drug Administration requires that a drug prove that it's efficacious and not hazardous. You're going to have to do the same thing for any kind of autonomous telepresence or avatar. The more autonomous it is, the more you need to prove that it actually is an accurate representation of you. Faith and tradition are important components of personality. They're important components of who we are. So if we want to accurately reflect that, we need to take them very seriously. To some extent, faith and tradition act as a buffer, as a means of carefully guiding the future, not rushing into things that could be bad for us as a society. We want to accurately reflect faith and tradition that varies from person to person. Even the most scientific people have a whole variety of things that they may or may not want to call faith, but it does involve leaps that are not evidentiary in their lifetime or in their hands. So the question, and to some extent, one of the vetting mechanisms, one of the things we want to do with new technology is to show that they accurately reflect the nuances of our sentiments, of our ethics, of our policy making, our highest decision making levels. And so we will be asking of all our avatars, the autonomous ones, whether they think the same way we do about articles of faith and articles of decision making that are based in part on faith.